Let's have a quick look at the budget or a couple of the insights from the budget through the demographic lens. A budget, of course, always relies on a large amount of assumptions. We have assumptions in there about a vaccine being available by next year. Hopefully this is possible. The government appears to have done all the right steps in order to get a vaccine nice and early for this to happen. So it would be great if this was actually happen to turn out this way. We also have assumptions in there about localized future outbreaks of the coronavirus being contained rather quickly. Hopefully that works out, and so on. Many more assumptions in a budget like this. But the most important assumptions that as a demographer I would be looking out for are, of course, number one, and we see this here on screen, the net overseas migration figure. Ever since the end of the Second World War, Australia was attracting more and more migrants every year, or more. It attracted more migrants than migrants left Australia. The best estimate in the budget for this year that we're in is that we are losing 72,000 people net migration. Considering that usually we have around 200,000, 150, 180,000 people plus in this measurement, this is a drastic drop and probably larger than I personally would have expected. So that's quite a shocker to actually see this falling that far. That said, maybe this is a more conservative assumption, if you will. And if it doesn't turn out to be just that low, then you will definitely have a higher GDP, for example. That said, we do see 2 years of negative net migration being forecasted, and then within 2 years to actually recover to pre-COVID levels. That's quite a nice assumption. Hope this works, but it also shows that there will be a lag. 2 years of really low migration from a GDP perspective. This is a big hit. Other assumptions that are in there, the fertility rate. I've been talking about this for a couple of months now, that the whole joke that people might be making that there will be a corona baby boom will most positively not be true. In a pandemic, in times of economic uncertainty, the birth rate drops. That's exactly what the budget forecasts show. I think they're actually reasonable levels forecasted. And the great news, of course, and let's not forget the actual wonderful impact that this news has, is that we didn't have to adjust our mortality rate. In fact, life expectancy is going to go up over the next couple of years according to the latest assumptions in the budget. That's great news, because it actually means that we're managing the coronavirus all right from at least the mortality perspective. Economically, we'll have to think about this a bit more. So that is a big break, demographically speaking, that is ahead of Australia. That means all the areas that relied on population growth or relied on migration for their population growth, they won't see nearly as much growth as expected. Whereas regional areas that get their population growth from net interstate migration, they can actually see growth. So again, that's a thing that speaks in favor of regional Australia. Well, there's plenty more to talk about, but I particularly want to bring your attention to a larger issue that has been, I would think, be the number one issue in Australia for a couple of years now, and this is what I call the hollowing out of the Australian workforce. The Australian workforce divides jobs into 5 different categories, 5 skill levels. You need to have a university degree to have a skill level 1 job. You need to have some sort of trade certificate for a skill level 3 job, and you need to have no qualification at all for a skill level 5 job. And the higher your skill level is, the higher your income is on average. And this chart here shows the change of skill level over 35 years, and we do see that the middle skilled, tradie type, manufacturing type jobs, middle class, middle income Australian jobs have been declining as a share of total jobs ever since the 70s, really. We only have data back to the mid 80s. 20% of jobs in Australia were skill level 3 in the 80s. Now we're to 14. This is continuing to shrink. And therefore, I'm quite happy that this budget, which is of course predominantly focused on creating jobs, which is cool, but I was hoping to see enough signs to actually have skill level 3 jobs being created. And this is exactly the case, which is the best news in the budget that I could actually find. All the job efforts are targeted as young apprenticeship programs. They're targeted at the manufacturing sector. They are pouring money into regional Australia, into agriculture. That is great news for skill level 3 jobs. The biggest challenge that you have, or that we have, I think, collectively in Australia, is to get as many skill level 4 jobs transformed into skill level 3 jobs. And this happens by upgrading our manufacturing capabilities, by upgrading our agriculture technology to have a higher need for more highly trained people, and then those people simply are able to live a better life on a higher income. So all of this is pointing in the right direction. The massive, absolutely massive infrastructure program. I've been talking for a couple of months again now for the infrastructure program is going to be released. There was no other way around, and the infrastructure program had to be as big as it was. So that is actually fantastic news. There are also things that I miss in the budget. I would have particularly liked the government to take a lead in social housing. In Australia, where we have more and more people in skill level 4, skill level 5 jobs, for those people, it's really hard to afford housing at all, actually. And a stronger social housing sector or program would have helped those people more than a job subsidy, for example. That said, fingers crossed that this will eventually see the light of day. Also, I was surprised to not see a stronger effort put into free childcare. That's the idea of, if you want to get Australia back to work, and you can't rely on net migration to do this for a while. The easiest way to get more Aussies into work is to make childcare free. So you have you really help those highly trained young women to get back into the workforce. There is so much pent-up economic energy in young women that we are keeping at home because free childcare isn't available. That's, I think, a big oversight in the budget that we saw. That said, overall, it should be enough to create enough jobs and to create the right type of jobs, which is really, really nice. Overall, I was surprised by the relatively green and progressive language in the budget. Not that any meaningful environmental programs were announced, but the language is at least trying to throw a bone to the left. So there is some sort of peace offer in there, maybe. I don't think that any of the Labour or Green politicians in the coming days, when they comment on the budget, will share my view, at least not publicly. But nonetheless, it's a budget that is very interesting from a demographic point of view. It's heavily favoring the right types of jobs. It will heavily be favoring regional Australia, which is actually great news. That's, of course, just a quick first look 2 hours after the budget has been released.